DaVo here from the Axiom Body Piercing Studio in Des Moines, Iowa, located inside the lovely Skin Kitchen and in serious need of a haircut. Coming up next, why isn't my piercing healing? Top 10 most common mistakes and problems with healing a piercing. So stick around. Before we get into this too far, I don't know how to stress enough that if you're having an issue with your piercing, you do need to go see your piercer. The reality is, I'm sure you're having issues because you probably found this video for that reason. Seeing it firsthand, taking a look at the area, taking into account what's going on, and trying to figure out what is causing the issue and how to solve it is very important. So, getting on the internet may give you some clues or some ideas of some things to change, but the reality of the situation is nothing substitutes going and having a hands-on consultation, first person with your piercer in talking about what's going on. The other thing is, if you don't feel like you're getting any solutions from that piercer, maybe try seeing another one with a little bit more experience, or never hesitate to see a doctor if you think the problem has gotten worse or isn't getting solved. Now that we've covered that, here's 10 of the most common reasons why piercings take a long period to heal, or the most common mistakes. The first one is often people do not take care of the piercing until it's completely healed. It goes through a period of time where it's sore and tender, etc., and discharges a lot, and then suddenly it seems like it's fine, it's okay, it doesn't hurt anymore, and people just simply stop taking care of it. Piercings, regardless of where you have it at, can take anywhere up to a year to completely heal. When we say a healed piercing, what we're talking about is a period of time. It's going to take your body to grow a tunnel of tissue around the jewelry to where it is no longer an open wound. And precautions have to be taken during that period of time, including daily cleanings and hot compresses and soaks of warm water and sea salt and various other things. Precautions, cross-contamination, avoiding abuse, etc. And if you stop doing those things, your chances of infection increase, your problems with piercing, abuse, etc., and other problems that creep up increase. So, whenever in doubt of whether or not your piercing is healed, go see your piercer. Have them take a look at it. Say, hey, it stopped discharging. It seems like it's growing that tissue inward like we want it. Do you think it's healed? And they'll be happy to go, yes, you did a fantastic job. You're awesome, gold star. Or go, hey, it's not quite healed. Let's give it a couple more weeks or so. When we talk about healing times, we're always talking about averages. And those take into account a great deal of people. Now, there might be something about you that's very specific. Either you heal slower, you have bad nutrition, or you're just one of those people that it just takes a long time for you to grow tissue. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. That doesn't mean you're an alien or some kind of weirdo. It just means it's going to take longer. Second thing, number two, changing the jewelry before the piercing is completely healed. This is a really common one. You get that initial piece of jewelry and you kind of like it, but you really want to go out there and get the special piece. The thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, as piercings heal, they heal from the outside inward. So a lot of times those two ends are not connected. So when you put jewelry through there, there's always a chance you're going to dislodge one side or the other, start the healing process over, and cause other problems. Changing the shape of the jewelry to either a tighter turn or a looser turn, or adding additional weight to the piercing, or even the metal that the jewelry is made out of itself, can cause issues during the healing process, and sometimes even after the healing process. So, once again, when in doubt of whether or not the piercing is healed, go see your piercer. Number 3, overhandling the jewelry. I think it's an instinct and probably part of our whole buildup for survival that the human body has been designed to do, that we are drawn to touch or feel things that hurt or seem uncomfortable or what have you, to soothe them, etc. I don't know if it's an instinct to evaluate how bad the damage is and assess it, or if it's just basically it's something we're drawn to. The thing is that your hands, no matter how well you wash them, can always have contaminants on it. And introducing contaminants to the piercing will cause an infection. The other issue is constantly handling the jewelry or playing with the jewelry is causing abuse to the piercing, which is going to prolong your healing period. You're not giving your body that rest it needs in being left alone to go and do its job. You're making it much harder. So don't handle the jewelry or play with it during the healing process. The other thing it can cause is it can increase the amount of inflammation you see in the area. Abuse always leads to more inflammation. So try to fight that urge to handle the jewelry. Number 4, at some point you may have had a minor infection. Sometimes, no matter how well you take care of them, some foreign pathogen worked its way into the piercing for one reason or another, and your body is fighting off and trying to expel that infection. Usually this will happen, the area will become agitated, red, discolorization, heat, or feels inflamed or feverish because your body's fighting off the infection. Also, it's not uncommon to see discharges in an unusual or unnatural color. And what it'll do is it'll try to isolate the infection by developing a cyst or an abscess. Then it will slowly and very often painfully push it to the surface. So sometimes when you see that bump next to a piercing, it means that your body's expelling an infection. Whether or not you need medical attention is how severe the area is, and that is another thing that you need to talk to your piercer about. And if in doubt, go see your doctor. Number 5, and possibly the curse of all piercings, especially if you're a stomach sleeper like me, sleeping on the piercing. You cannot, no matter how, I don't care if you fall down asleep and you don't feel anything, sleeping on the piercing, we tend to move around a lot in our sleep, and it can cause a lot of abuse and agitation to the piercing. Not only that pressure, but the twisting and turning of the jewelry from the pressure, and when you turn and move and do etc., can cause abuse to the piercing, which is going to prolong your healing period and make it harder for your piercing, for your body to produce that tissue like we want it to. One of the first questions I always ask when we're trying to troubleshoot what's going on with the piercing is, when does it hurt the most? If it hurts first thing in the morning, chances are you're sleeping on it. There are a couple of precautions you can take if you've listened to or watched any of my aftercare instruction videos on ears or etc., of figuring out a way to elevate the piercing off the bed or avoid rolling over and sleeping on it. So don't sleep on your piercing while it's healing. Abuse to the piercing area. This could be a lot of things. Anything that's restrictive, abrasive, or blocks the flow of oxygen to the piercing. For example, if you ride a motorcycle and you have an upper ear cartilage piercing, if you're putting a helmet on 2-3 times a day and taking it off, not only is there a problem with possibly introducing contaminants from the helmet itself, but you're putting pressure on it, you're moving the jewelry around, you're agitating it, you're drawing things into it, and possibly dislodging new skin growth. Same thing goes for any type of exercise where the piercing gets a lot of contact. Like, for example, I wouldn't suggest doing wrestling if you had a navel piercing. Use your mind, come up with some ideas, and try to avoid contact or abuse with that piercing. Incorrect jewelry. This is a common thing, especially after the piercing is healed, where a perfectly well-healed piercing will suddenly flare up. Incorrect jewelry can involve either the type of jewelry or style, the size of the jewelry, the curvature of the jewelry, or whether or not it's straight. It can also involve it being either too big or too small. During the healing process, we always want a little bit of extra room to allow for inflammation and swelling. Even after the piercing is healed, our body does expand and contract a little bit throughout day-to-day life. So if you put something in there that's super tight, your body might feel that it is abusive and start building up often kind of almost like a callus to try to, or a blister to protect itself. So it's always best, as I say, with jewelry, is you want it not too big, not too small, but something balanced in the middle. As far as curved jewelry or circular jewelry, you also want to avoid with rings that go through a large area that are very tight in circumference. Putting a piece of jewelry in that is going through a hole that's, let's say, the actual piercing is roughly about 3/8 of an inch. If you put a piece of round jewelry in there that is going to be, has a diameter of 5/16, it's going to be very constricted to the piercing. It's going to cause tearing and abuse on the inside of the piercing and all kinds of other issues. Plus, it will cause the jewelry to stick straight out, opposed to laying flat to the body and in a more comfortable position. With barbells, if they're too short, they're not going to allow for that expansion. If they're too long, they're going to get caught and snagged on things. Then we come down to weight. If the weight of the jewelry is too heavy, it can cause abuse of the piercing, can cause tearing of that new tissue, and all kinds of other issues. So it's very important that when you initially do the piercing that you have that correct jewelry size and style that's going to work best for that piercing. And fits into the shape of your body. That's why a good piercer will take a look at the area before they begin to choose jewelry, to try to come up with the best design, size, and etc. that's going to fit well into your anatomy and has a history and consistency of healing well in that particular piercing. And now we're up to number 8, reactions to aftercare products. There are a lot of different ideas on how to take care of piercings. Everything from don't do anything at all to use a surgical scrub. Somewhere in the middle is exactly where you want to be. When I do aftercare, the two things I always consider is you want something that's going to help speed up the healing process, but you also want something that reduces the amount of foreign pathogens in the area on a regular basis. The reason for that thinking with the sometimes something of an antimicrobial or germicidal product involved or an antiseptic is you're probably going to make a mistake and touch the area. Bacteria and other pathogens do move on the surface of your skin, so there's a chance from hair or what have you, cross-contamination, possible introduction of foreign pathogens, and then an infection. So, that said, there's a lot of products, even those that are specifically designed for piercing and those that are not specifically designed for piercing, all have their own little problems. One example would be O2 or H2 Ocean. I don't suggest using it. And the main reason being is that I don't like the fact that they don't clearly mark exactly what is in the product. And I have encountered people that have had allergic reactions to that particular product. Even though it says it's safe and it's natural and this and that and it's healing power of the ocean, etc., it contains egg whites. If you're allergic to dairy or eggs, you're going to have issues with that. The other end of the spectrum is really harsh soaps and cleaning products. Things with benzoyl chloride in it that have more than, let's say, 0.001% are a little too harsh. They can prolong your healing period. They can constantly agitate the piercing, dry it out, and cause longer healing periods. So it's kind of trying to find that easy balance between the two where we're helping the body, but we're also fighting off the chances of infection. Here's some things to think about when you're picking your aftercare instructions or aftercare products. What does your piercer suggest? Why do they suggest it? Ask them specifically why they suggest it. The second thing is find out exactly what the active ingredient is in that. If you have had reactions to any of the chemicals or anything that's listed in there, chances are you are going to have problems, and prolonged healing would be one of those. The other thing to consider is if you've ever used that product or brand before. Did you have issues with it? Have you not had issues with it? Then maybe that's not a bad choice. Number 9, we're almost there. Reactions to the body piercing jewelry's material. There are a lot of different materials that out there in the market, a lot of them especially aftermarket, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of people will have perfectly healed piercings and they put in a new piece of jewelry and then suddenly have problems, is because they're unaware exactly that they have either a reaction to that particular type of metal or what that metal is. Commonly in a fresh piercing, you only want to put implant grade certified surgical stainless steel, titanium, also implant certified, possibly 14 karat better solid gold, not plated or filled, niobium, if you can find it. It doesn't seem like there's that much around anymore, and possibly glass. There's a lot of people out there that have been piercing and experimenting with things like plastic. I'm not a big fan of plastic for various different reasons. It's a chemical, it's inside your body. Your body is prone to try to fight off and destroy anything that's implanted in it, like a piece of jewelry. So it's going to put that material under a lot of pressure during the healing process, and it could start breaking down that plastic, and then the next thing you know, it's entered into your bloodstream, and it's causing all kinds of other unwanted problems. There are products on there called bioplastic, which is more of a name brand than an actual thing. Always, rigid metal is your best option. When picking out jewelry, of course, we're going back to the whole sizing and etc. But when it comes to materials, a lot of people feel like they're allergic or have been told at some point in time they're allergic to nickel. It's a catch-all. At some point in your life, you got your ears pierced, you had a reaction, you went to the doctor, and the doctor said, no, it's not an infection, you're allergic to nickel. Because there was a big, long period of time where that was kind of the catch-all, that there was this whole study on how people were becoming allergic to nickel because of ear piercings. Did they do a test to determine scientifically that you're allergic to nickel? Because the chances are you're just allergic to cheap, crappy jewelry. Has nothing to do with nickel at all. So, some common things with nickel is if you have had issues wearing watches, any type of steel jewelry, belt buckles, jeans with the rivets on the back of it, if they caused you to break out, you probably might want to stay away from anything that contains nickel and go with something like titanium or niobium. Common thing I hear all the time is I can wear nothing but gold. Reality of the situation is that often gold has other alloys in it that you may have an allergic reaction to, depending on who actually manufactured and smelted and created that alloy. The common thing I see a lot is a lot of people come in and they're wearing a wedding ring and they claim that they're allergic to nickel. The reality of the situation is there's more nickel in tin and other components in that 10 karat jewelry than in any piece of jewelry that I've ever sold. So you're probably not going to have a problem with it. Whenever in doubt, though, pick the safest option, which in most cases is either titanium or niobium. Another thing to consider is the finish. And this is where good jewelry, high-end jewelry, and jewelry that's not so good comes into play. With high-end jewelry, you're going to have a higher shine, mirror-like finish. That is to protect you from all of the stuff that's in that alloy. Because there are some things in there that you don't want in your bloodstream and you don't want in contact with your skin for long, drawn-out periods. So, the better the quality of the jewelry, the higher that mirror the finish is, the safer the jewelry is. When in doubt, always ask your piercer. And always ask lots of questions. Why do you like this material? Why is this material safe? Why do you think I'm not going to have a reaction to this? Where do you get your jewelry from? Is there any way I can see a mill certificate? Blah, 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 blah. Just ask questions. Most reputable piercers will be happy to share that information with you. Now we come to user error. Something that you didn't do. Number 10, and the final one. the piercing was incorrectly placed or done in the first place. Piercings, especially through certain parts of the anatomy, if they are pierced incorrectly at the wrong angle, can cause issues, regardless of how well you've taken care of it, and regardless of what jewelry is in the piercing. It doesn't matter. If the angle is off, or they've taken too much tissue or too little tissue, your body is going to react to that in ways that you do not want it to do, including prolonged healing. How do you know? Well, does it look natural or normal to the area? I think probably one of the most common things I see is upper ear cartilage piercings done with ear piercing devices. Because the ear piercing device does not fit over the helix, which is that outer rim of your ear, this part right here, they will do them at angles where they're like this, or like this, or like this, or like that. I have had clients that have healed piercings out and specifically asked for that particular style of piercing and had no issue with it. But the reality is that if that angle's off like that, and it's off the other direction too, it might be putting too much pressure on the piercing and causing issues. The other thing it creates is a much longer healing distance. Okay, so we have point A, that's this side of the piercing, and point B. If point A to point B are lined up like this, it's going to take longer for it to get from point A to point B. If they are in alignment, it's going to take less time. So you're going to have a shorter healing period. So if you have a prolonged healing period, they may have taken too much tissue, like piercing it this big when it really only needs to be this big, or the angle is so off that it's just taking a long period of time to heal. Everybody's shaped differently, and one of the hardest things to learn as a piercer is adapting to each person's individual anatomy and knowing where it's going to look best and where it's going to work best. Also, never hesitate. The reason why we show you those marks when we do them is to have your input on the piercing. If the mark looks really off or what have you, talk to your piercer, have them adjust it. It's much easier to do it before you do the piercing. Most times, I will mark both sides. A lot of times people look at the piercing mark and they'll go, I don't know what any of this means, I just trust you, which is fine. But if you get the piercing done and the angle looks off and it doesn't seem right to you, your best option is to remove the jewelry as quickly as possible. It's going to reduce the amount of scar tissue, and it can probably be re-pierced at a quicker time than if you leave the jewelry in for 3 months and then realize it's not going to heal that way. However, it's always best to ask your piercer beforehand. Something may look off to you, but it may have more to do with the length of the jewelry because they had to put a longer one in to allow for inflammation, and it may not look that bad after it heals. In conclusion, once again, whenever you have an issue or a problem with a piercing, go see your piercer. You can always ask people questions online. Most piercers are very open about educating the public about problems. I answer emails all the time on piercings I didn't do, phone calls, messages on Facebook, etc., and try to walk people through this process of trying to figure out what's going on. When in doubt, obviously, go see your physician. If it seems infected or if there's a lot of signs of infection, go see your physician. They have access to medical equipment and things like drugs that your average piercer can't get access to. But it's always a good idea to check in with them because not all doctors are educated on piercings. So they may look at it in a standpoint of from a purely medical field, which is there's a foreign object in there, it's bad, it needs to be removed. So see your piercer, see if you can get it straightened around, but if it doesn't start to kind of come around and start getting better, go ahead and see a physician. The other thing I'm going to talk about is pain and piercing pains. Certain piercings, especially on the ears, that have a lot of contact with day-to-day with various different items, tend to be grumpy long after they heal. No matter how well they heal, no matter how well they take care of them, they can just sometimes 2, 10, 15 years later, if you sleep on them wrong, they're not going to feel good the next day. The only time you really need to be concerned about that is when it continues to be that way, especially if you've changed into a new piece of jewelry from maybe a different manufacturer that you're unaware of. So always check. So there you go. There's the 10 most common reasons that it takes longer for your body to heal a piercing. If you like the video, please give us a thumbs up. It's your way of applauding me for my good work. If you'd like to see more of this, I do post a lot of piercing education videos. I also do the weekly updates with the guys from the Skin Kitchen, Wesley and Jack, where they have their tattoo of the week, and they kind of explain the tattoo that they enjoyed doing, and why they enjoyed it, or why they think it's important, or why they think it's unique. And also I keep you updated on what I have going on, either posting videos and specials for those in the Des Moines area. I'm always open to questions. Please make a comment if you have a question or you feel like I covered something or I covered it in a confusing way and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Please make a comment. I'm happy to answer that and join in the conversation and discussion about it. The point of these videos is to educate you and my clients. Even if you're not a client, I want to educate you because I love piercing and that's what I do. Lastly, and more importantly, subscribe. Like I said earlier, we do post videos here on a regular basis, including the weekly updates and Q&A in the kitchen, which is a kind of talk show kind of thing where we take one body art question and then dig into it, kind of an insider's viewpoint of the body modification industry, tattooing and piercing. Other than that, have a lovely day, and I hope to see you in the studio for your piercing needs in the future.